If you have ever watched Fern get quietly frustrated with Frieren and thought, why doesn't she just say something? Here is the actual question underneath that. What if what looks like forgiveness in this relationship was never forgiveness at all? There is a moment where Fern's staff breaks, a gift from Heiter, something she would never replace, and Frieren's first reaction is basically, just get a new one. Fern's hurt by that, and without ever circling back to actually address it, Frieren quietly gets the staff repaired anyway. So in this video, I want to get into why what's happening between Fern and Frieren isn't actually forgiveness, why Frieren never learns to say sorry and just fixes things instead, and why that means Fern's the one doing all the adjusting in a relationship that will never ask the same of Frieren. Okay, here's the full scene, because there is more happening in it than just the fix. Fern's staff breaks, and Frieren's first reaction isn't comfort, it's practicality. Just get a new one. Which stings, because this isn't just a staff to Fern, it's the one Heiter gave her. She vents about it to Stark, and even he doesn't fully take her side. He tells her Frieren was probably just trying her best to understand her in her own weird way. And then, without saying any of that to Fern directly, Frieren goes and gets the staff repaired anyway. That's the actual sequence we're sitting with. The dismissive comment, the venting, and then the quiet fix with zero conversation connecting any of it. Frieren never circles back and says, sorry about what I said. She just skips straight to the gesture instead, which is exactly why calling this forgiveness doesn't fit. Forgiveness needs the wrong named and addressed before it gets let go of. Here, nothing gets named between them directly. Fern vents to someone else entirely, and Frieren still finds her own way to respond, just never in words and never to Fern's face. So what's actually going on then? Same thing you would do with a chronically late friend. Eventually, you stop waiting for the apology and just plan around who they actually are. Which brings up the actual question this leaves you with. If Fern isn't forgiving Frieren and isn't waiting around for her to change either, what is she actually doing every single day they keep traveling together? So that staff thing wasn't a fluke. Once you notice it, you start seeing it's basically Frieren's whole operating system. Here's the thing about Frieren. She's not bad with people because she doesn't care. She's bad with people because she's not really built to think in the time frame humans think in. She has lived for centuries. Watching Himmel and the others age and die was basically the time she really felt the weight of a human lifespan. And even now, she still processes things on a scale that doesn't match up with anyone traveling with her. So when Fern needs comfort in the moment, in words right now, Frieren's default isn't cruelty, it's just a different language entirely. Actions instead of apologies. Fixes instead of feelings talked through. Think of it like a parent who is terrible at saying I love you out loud, but always remembers exactly how you take your coffee 3 years running without you ever telling them twice. So that's not nothing. It's just not the thing you were actually asking for in the moment. And you see that mismatch play out constantly with Frieren. She'll forget something that mattered emotionally to Fern, completely miss the moment where Fern needed her to just sit and listen, but then she'll quietly do something that shows she absolutely was paying attention the whole time, just not in the way anyone was expecting. The staff repair is one version of it. It happens again and again across the story, and don't worry, I have one more example. In smaller ways, little gestures that only make sense in hindsight once you already know Frieren well enough to translate them. Which is exactly the skill Fern's had to build. Nobody teaches you how to read someone who shows care sideways instead of head on. Fern basically had to become fluent in a language Frieren never consciously taught her and probably doesn't even know she's speaking. That's the actual mechanism running underneath all of it. Frieren never learns to say sorry. She just fixes things instead. And somewhere along the way, Fern stopped needing the apology to know she had been hurt. Because let's be honest, actions matter more than words. But here is where it gets more complicated. Learning someone's language doesn't mean the relationship's suddenly equal. Just because Fern can read Frieren now doesn't mean Frieren's doing the same amount of reading back. Which brings us to the part of this that's honestly a little bittersweet if you sit with it. Fern is the one who's had to do basically all of the adjusting here. She learned Frieren's language, she built her expectations around Frieren's pace, she stopped waiting for the apologies. Frieren, as far as we ever really see on screen, never has to do the same work in reverse. She doesn't have to learn how to read Fern the way Fern's had to learn to read her. And you could look at that and go, well, that's just not fair. One person's doing all the emotional labor, and the other one just gets to exist as she is. That's a real cost, and it's worth naming, honestly, instead of pretending the relationship is perfectly balanced just because it's sweet. But here is the thing that actually makes this specific relationship different from just any one-sided friendship. Frieren isn't choosing to be lopsided out of laziness or selfishness. She's an elf. She's going to outlive Fern by centuries. Everyone she has ever loved has already died once, and will keep dying over and over for as long as she keeps living. Of course, she's slower to open up. Of course, she doesn't operate on the same emotional clock a mortal does. Which means Fern isn't just adjusting to a person here, she's adjusting to someone living on a completely different scale of time than she'll ever get to exist on. Okay, here is the example I promised. There is a scene much later that shows exactly how far that adjustment has actually come. Not as resignation, but as something closer to mastery. Frieren keeps blowing through their travel money on impulsive purchases, the same habit she's had the entire story. Except this time, Fern's already 3 steps ahead of her. She had quietly hidden money away specifically because she knew this exact thing would happen. And Frieren's reaction isn't annoyance in this moment, it isn't even a surprise. She is proud. She pets Fern's head, delighted like watching a student finally surpass the lesson. So that's not two people meeting halfway, right? That's Fern getting so fluent in who Frieren actually is that she has started anticipating her before the flaw even shows up. And Frieren, for maybe the first time, actually seeing it happen and being moved by it instead of missing it entirely. So is it fair that Fern did all that work alone? Not really, but it's also not nothing that this one time Frieren actually noticed. So that's the actual difference nobody names when they talk about this relationship. Fern learned to speak a language Frieren never even knew she was teaching. She built an entire life around loving someone whose sense of time will never quite match her own. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.